All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi there, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us for today's first session. We actually have two sessions today for you to look forward to. We have a fantastic session by Damien Goldberg and then one by Daniel Pink later on this evening. Now, before I do anything, can I just please ask, and I haven't asked yet, so put your hands back down, okay? Right, no, I'm joking. If you could just raise your hands in the air just to let me know that you can hear me loud and clear. That would be super. Okay, brilliant. Awesome. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Okay, so as always, I would strongly encourage you to interact as much as possible with the session. How you do that is in a number of different ways. Number one, we're going to have one or two polls throughout the session. So please listen out for those. And when they are posted on the screen, please make your submissions and add your contributions to the session. Also, if you have any questions whatsoever throughout the session, please post them in the chat box. Damien may have some time throughout the presentation where he will stop and take some of those questions. But otherwise, we will have a Q&A session at the back end of the session. So please, if you have anything you just don't understand, you need clarity over, please don't sit there just with a block. Just post it in there, because if you're thinking, it's probably someone else that's also has that same question. So you actually be helping out your peers at the same time. Now the session is going to run for approximately 1 hour, and we'll have some time for Q&A as well. So please set your clocks for that. And okay, so we're ready to start the session. Now, what I'd like to do is introduce Damien Goldberg. Now, Damien's a global leader on leadership development. He's the PhD in MCC and has 20 years of experience in executive assessment and coaching, leadership development, talent management, facilitation, strategic planning, and team building. He's originally from Argentina, where I actually spent a year of my life, one of the best years of my life in Buenos Aires. And he has extensive experience working with people from different cultures and social backgrounds. Now, he's worked with individuals and organizations in over 40 countries, a very diverse experience, offering services in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. And he is the current global president of the largest coaching association in the world, the International Coach Federation. And you can find a bit more about Damien using the link that you can see on the screen now. So without further ado, I would like to hand over to my very good friend, Damien Goldberg.
Hi, Ben. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are in the world. Good evening. It's a pleasure being here, Ben. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful event. And I want to start by briefly talking about ICF for people who are not familiar with International Coach Federation. We are 21,000 plus members in more than 111 countries, where I am very happy to share with you, Ben, that this week we got to be 10,000 ICF credential holders in the world. This is a big accomplishment. And this is very important to us. Our mission is to lead the global advancement of the coaching profession. And we develop standards, and credential holders are the ones who make our profession to get more credibility and develop. And today I'm going to share with you a piece of research. ICF has been committed to do research over the last few years. Mark Ruth, our director of research, and is going to be with us too to share with us some of the information about the study. But as you can see in the slide, we have been doing industry research since 2007 with the Global Coaching Study, where we find out what were the trends at that time. We did the same study again last year. And I want to recommend everybody to go to our website, coachfederation.org. And in coachfederation.org, in our website, you will find all of the results from these studies. And there is an executive summary that you can download, and it's in many different languages. Also in 2009, we had the Global Coaching Client Study, where we found out what were the trends in terms of the needs and expectations from clients around coaching. 2010, we had the Global Consumer Awareness Study. And in 2013, this year, we came up with this coaching study. Most of the studies have done together with PricewaterhouseCoopers, who we partnered to develop one of these projects. So let me tell you about what are our objectives for today. I am going to be sharing the results of the study. Ben, this is the first time that we're sharing this information with the public and with our members. So this is the first presentation that we're doing about the organizational coaching study. And basically, we have some questions. We wanted to know what triggered coaching in the organizations. We wanted to know what were the roles of internal and external coaches. We wanted to understand a little more about what was the criteria for organizations to identify coaches and to find them. And also return on investment, how organizations are measuring the results. So these are the key objectives of the study and the topics that I am going to be covering today. And I want you to feel free to write any questions you may have for me during the presentation in the space for the chat. So you can see in the chat space, you may have some questions and I will be answering them during the session. And as Ben said, at the end of the session, we're going to have a dialogue where we're going to open the lines for you to do some questions. So the approach, how did we do that? We started with a World Cafe session last year at our international conference in London, where we have coaches from all over the world. And in this space, people came and discussed and identified what were the key issues, the key topics that we were interested in learning about coaching in organizations. So as a result of this meeting and as a result of the findings from this World Cafe session, we piloted the first phase with a focus group. And in this focus group, organized by PricewaterhouseCoopers, we realized that the approach of having focus groups all over the world, that was our first approach, what we were thinking to do originally, we realized that that would not be the best way to collect the data because there were a lot of issues about confidentiality and there were some concerns from people about how the disclosing confidential information from the organization was not comfortable to be heard by other colleagues. So because of that, we changed our approach and we decided to do on-depth interviews. So to have we had 25 interviews where between February 25 and April 10th, and these 24 telephone depth interviews were conducted during this month. And what I want to clarify here this is a qualitative study. In the past, we have been doing mainly quantitative studies using to have empirical surveys and we're able to make some projections about the research hypothesis. This is a qualitative research phase. So they're in-depth interviews where it's more exploratory. So I want to clarify that before I start sharing with you some of the results. Now, where were these people from? As you can see in the regional breakdown, from the 24 interviews, almost half were in North America, but the other half were in the rest of the world. Western Europe, Oceania, Latin America, Asia, and Eastern Europe. And it's interesting that you can see the industry spread here. You see that people belong to different industries from health, pharmacy, IT, manufacturing, retail, consulting and financial services, and transport. The background of the participant was a variety of backgrounds from human resources, learning and development. The majority were experts in the area of coaching, and they were very familiar with how coaching was brought up to the organization. Some of them managed the coaching programs. They were very involved, and they were the ones who knew the information about how coaching was used in their organizations. And what's interesting is that they were at different stages of the company life cycle. So some were more mature, some were less mature. But let's start with some of the questions that we asked. And the first question was, what initiated coaching in the organization? Why they decided to call coaches? And it's interesting that there was not any specific event that initiated coaching. And it was not something concrete or specific. It was more related to strategies around leadership development, succession planning, issues around executive burnout and prevention on burnout, executives dealing with stress issues, and organizational expansion and change. So these were the 4 key themes that we identified why coaches were called to their organizations. Now, for people who have been in the field for many years, and I don't know the experience of people who are in this call today, in the past, many times I was called to in organizations to do more remedial coaching, where I was asked to come to work with somebody who has some performance challenges, some difficulties. But over the time, I have seen less and less of that. And in the last few years, I have almost not been called to do this kind of coaching. And I have been more involved in leadership development programs where companies and organizations, I work from Fortune 100 companies to government agencies. I work for one organization that is that give me permission to talk about the work that I do with them. They received a PRISM award from ICF, that is the United Nations Secretariat. So I work with the United Nations, with coach with managers all over the world, doing coaching and leadership training. So most of the time now, the coaching is around leadership development. Is about bringing coaches to support the high level executives and middle managers to be effective in their current job or be prepared for future assignments. So nowadays, most of the work done in organization is around leadership development, and it's a component. Like in the past, used to be training, like every organization provide training. Now coaching is part of the development of executives at all levels of the organization. So we're going to talk about that later. Now, who in the organization receives coaching? And this is what I was starting to answer before. Some quotes here from some of the interviewees. I'm not going to read them, but this is for you to get a sense of some of the comments from the people who we. But basically, we identified 4 different categories. One, senior level executives, and that was the majority. Then high potential employees to be prepared for future assignments. Middle management, and role-specific positions. Some positions that may be challenging or have some challenging aspects of it. So based on that, we identified these 4 key levels of coaching at the organizations. And so preparing people for corporate project, this is what related to the last point. So it's about preparation. And in the coaching continuum, we can say that people were in organizations were hiring internal and external coaches. So we're going to talk now about this distinction between how organizations decide if they're going to have internal or external coaching, and what is the advantage and disadvantage of this. So let's have a conversation, and I will also be interested later to find some of the people's experiences. What we found out is that most of these organizations use a mix of internal and external coaches. But a minority of these organizations were using only external coaches. And this depends on the regional locations, particularly for large global organizations that have sites all over the world. They mainly have external coaches, they don't have a pool of internal coaches. So as you can see in this quote, external coaches were used more because they don't have the resources in the organization. And the advantage of having internal coaches was to help people that they have a toolkit, as I said in this quote, that they can be used with their own teams. Sometimes also internal coaches was used to create a culture, coaching culture. Like for example, in the organization that I share with you, my experience working with United Nations, when they developed this program where they wanted to every middle manager to go through coaching through a program that had two components, what we leadership development and coaching. So the program lasts 4 months, and they have at the beginning of the program a coaching session, a leadership training session. And in this session, people go through key ideas about leadership, team building, coaching, manager as a coach, and then they will go through coaching for 3-4 sessions each. We also use a 360 instrument to measure where people are and what are the perceptions that people have about them and that they have about themselves. And we will use this information to come up with a coaching program. And then at the format, they will get back to the second part of the program where we will meet again with instructor and colleagues to share their learnings, their challenges, their accomplishments, how they were how successful or not were they means implementing the learnings from the program and from the coaching sessions. Now, what are the benefits of internal coaches? The benefits of using internal coaches in organizations are around the knowledge of the organization, culture. People who work inside the organization are more familiar with the different variables. Also, an issue about cost and accessibility. It's much more expensive to use external coaches. And also it's appropriate in terms of developing skill sets that can be used in the organization, and also for developing internal networks. So that was one of the greatest advantages, the knowledge of the culture of the organization. And as I said, the costs were key things. Now, what were the drawbacks? One is about the internal politics. At the same time that there is added advantage of knowing the culture, also there are at play many internal issues that can be in the way. And a key big issue is confidentiality. So confidentiality came up in many ways during these interviews. From the pilot group, where we realized that people were not comfortable talking about this. Organizations don't feel comfortable giving us permission to use their names, who they are. If you were curious about what organizations were, we do not have the permission to use their names. So I think that confidentiality is something for all of us who are interested or are working in organizations to be very aware about how that plays in the work that we do as coaches in organizations. The other drawbacks can be lack of training, and that's one of the challenges that we have, people coaching without having the appropriate training, and this was also one of the findings from our last year global coaching study, where we learned that coaches believe that one of the biggest challenges for us as a profession is that coaches that don't have the training, don't have the experience, call themselves coaches, and this is a threat for the profession. Now, let's talk about the external coaches. The benefits of external coaching is that people are specialists. They are independent, and they have accreditation and training. And many of them maybe have been in the past in roles, executive roles, or they have years of experience, and that seniority experience make a big difference. I think that also external coaches bring, at the same time that they don't have that cultural information, they don't bring also the cultural bias from being part of the organization. And I think that external coaches in percentages nowadays, I think are used much more than internal coaches. And the benefit also includes bringing a different perspective. It's about being more objective, maybe. But the drawback is the cost. Of course, external coaches are much more expensive than internal coaches. And the lack of cultural understanding, and sometimes they cannot observe the coaching at work. This is what our interview said, even though that can be arranged. I have experience working in organizations many times. I have shadowed my clients. So that is possible. Of course, can be expensive for the organization, but I think it's an important practice. Some of the drawbacks can be the cost, basically, and I think that that probably will be the main one. I want to go back to confidentiality, because I think that here confidentiality is a key challenge. How do we deal with it? And the key, I think, for us as coaches working in organization is to be clear, and assurance of confidentiality is very important. As you can see here, the people who were interviewed brought this up in different ways, and they brought up as a concern, as an issue to pay attention to. So what is key here is in the agreement stage of the work, confidentiality needs to be arranged, needs to be clarified. And my experience also is that many times even confidentiality is very clarified at the beginning of the program, and there is agreement about it. Still, people don't trust 100% till they get to know the coach well and they get to understand the process. In general, the responses in terms of internal versus external coaches and satisfaction, they were very satisfied with internal coaches, that they have high standards and expectations with regards to confidentiality. However, they were also feeling that some of the internal coaches have some may perceived as having a position of power or privilege, because they have information that other people don't have. And particularly these internal coaches are working for very senior positions. So when we're using coaches, internal coaches in organizations, and they have to work with very senior positions, that can be challenging. And my experience is most of the times these high-level positions don't want to use internal coaches. They really want to use external coaches. It's somebody say, doesn't matter how often I tell them that the conversations are confidential, it is their perception that they are safer with an external coach. It's an interesting comment here that I want to reinforce. Now let's move on to how to choose the right coach. And here it's interesting to find out that the key theme about choosing the right coach, and people here who are interested in, some of you are already organizational coaches, some of you may be interested in becoming organizational coaches. The reputation is the key. How coaches build a reputation, and how organizations look for coaches who have that reputation. And in part of that are success stories. What are the clients that can share some of the success stories that help to build that reputation? How coaches can get to work with people who get great results in organizations. After the reputation, the second one is the recommendations. So if organizations need to hire a coach, they will go and they will look for people to recommend them coaches. It will be a much common practice to do that than just go into the internet and look for a coach in the internet. So recommendation is very important, and I have seen that play in my experience. I have seen how most of my clients, I received some new organizations that I'm working as a coach through social media, internet, but most of my referrals over the last 20 years, they come from my colleagues or clients. So that's the reason why belonging to associations and participating in networks and connecting with other professionals, it's so important for us as coaches, because recommendation is the favorite way for most of these interviews to hire and find the coaches. So here, and this is my experience over the years, I have recommended many colleagues. I also got a lot of recommendations myself through colleagues. And I think that it's important for us to be aware of that. And this makes a difference in terms of how we build our networks and how we let people know what we are doing, so they can keep us in mind when organizations ask them for referrals. And the other part that is interesting, these referrals are coming from different professionals, not only coaches. And this is also related to one of our strategies at ICF, is to partner with other associations to develop strategic partnerships. Because for coaching as a profession to grow and develop, we need to do that to bring awareness to other associations. And for example, Mark Ruth, our director of research, he was very active participating with his team in the ASTD conference, that is the American Training and Development Association. And also we work with many other associations, human resources associations, to be sure that we share resources. And for us as coaches also, to the extent that we are exchanging information, participating, developing relationships with professionals in the human resources sector also, that makes a big difference in terms of referrals and recommendations. The third issue that came up that is taken into consideration to hire coaches is experience, particularly working with senior with senior management. So after reputation and recommendations and the referral, they're looking for experience, chemistry between the coach and the coachee, and also credentials and certification and accreditation. But that was not consistent with all of the interviewees. So I am curious, and I want to ask you for your opinion. We have in this call around 200 people, and I am curious to know what is your experience when you're working in organizations. I have a specific question for you, and this is going to be our poll number 1. So now Ben is going to help us with this poll. But the question is, how important is a coaching credential to be hired as a coach by an organization? So the question that I have, what is based on your experience, do you think it's very important? Do you think it's important, or you think that it's not important? So Ben, can you help us with this poll?
I have already launched the poll for you, Damien. We have about 40% already voted. We're up to 50%. We are now shooting up to 60%. We've got about another 20 seconds left for you to vote. If you can post your votes, fantastic. Okay, awesome. We're already up to 70%. Okay, we're going to close the poll off in the next 10 seconds. Last chance to vote. And we are closing off the poll now. Thank you very much, everyone, for voting. I'm now going to close the poll and share the results. Damien, what we have as extremely important, we have 18%. Very important, we have 28%. Important, we have 36%. And not important, which is one of the lowest, is 18%.
Okay, well, this is a good normal distribution. And I think that we can say that for the majority, having a credential is important, or very important. So I think that reinforces our idea about paying attention to coaching credentials. I think that nowadays, and I want to share experience that happened to me this week. Nowadays, many organizations, government organizations in the United States, and big companies that are Fortune 100, who are very familiar with the coaching industry, they require their coaches to be credentialed. And I was talking to somebody from one of the psychological associations, one of the groups in the United States, and we're talking about the possibility to collaborate. And they were saying that some of their professionals have the challenge that when they want to apply for some of these government grants, there is a requirement to be ICF accredited. And even though ICF never lobbied for that, that is what is happening. And I think it's a reflection of, okay, I think something went wrong here. It's a reflection of the importance of credentials nowadays for coaches in the world. So for people who are working in organizations, as you can see, most of our participants agree that the credential is important. I want to encourage people to look into it. Now, for some reason, let's see. Okay. So let me tell you what some of the comments were here. Going back to criteria for people to be hired, I think that people felt that because they were recommended was a higher degree of trust. And of course, it makes a big difference if a client of mine who had great results working with me called somebody in his company, his organization, and said, I want to recommend to my coach. We have accomplished I have great results. This coach really challenged me, helped me to stretch myself. So as a result of that, I want to highly recommend this person. So that kind of recommendation helped to build trust much faster than if you get a coach that you didn't even choose. Some of the programs that I work, the coaches are selected by the clients, but many times coaching can be mandatory as part of the leadership development for a whole unit. And sometimes the participants don't get to choose who is the coach. So in these cases, building trust can take longer time, but when the coach is referred and somebody knows the person in advance, that makes a big difference in building trust faster. In terms of the differentiating criteria, to choose a coach is definitely related to credentialing, as you can see in this quote, or the chemistry is key here too. Now, how else people find these coaches? Some of them have a pool of preferred supplier lists they use. So based on over time, they have developed these lists and they use them when they need a coach. And most of them, some of them also use the International Coach Federation Coach Referral Service. And this is a service that we provide to our credential members. So even though we have more than 20,000 members and 10,000 are credentialed, we offer the coach referral service as an opportunity for anybody in the world to go to our website, to go to the coach referral service, and based on specific criteria, people can find a coach that meets specific needs. And what they do is an RFP come up where the person interested explain what kind of coach is looking, what are the specific requirements and concerns, and then an RFP is sent to all of the coaches who match that criteria. Also, people can go and look through this service, all of the coaches who are credentialed all of the coaches who are members of the ICF who are credentialed. So in terms of this service, again, you can find it at the coachfederation.org, and it's a way also that organizations are looking for coaches. It's interesting that none of the respondents at that time were currently using any other online searches or tools. So it's not that there are specific tools or online searches that they were using to find coaches. Okay, and we're getting close to the end of the findings from this study, and it's about the return on investment. You know, what is the value, the impact, and the effectiveness of coaching? What people can say that were the key impact from coaching in their organizations. And I would like to ask you to go to, we're going to go to poll number 2, and I want to ask people to tell us, based on your experience, what do you think is the greatest impact of coaching in organizations? Based on the work that you know or that you have been doing or your familiarity with coaching organizations, do you think that most of the results and the impact is related to leadership performance and results? It's about increasing engagement? It's about reducing attrition? Or it's about improving teamwork? And these were the 4 themes that came up as key results from the work of coaches in organizations. So Ben, let's go to poll number 2.
Okay, I have launched the poll for you. We already have over 50% have voted. Thank you very much for that. We're now over 60%, 65%. It's going up very quickly. Thank you very much for your engagement and attention throughout the session. That's always a good sign when you get lots of people contributing. I'm going to give everyone we only need another 10 seconds, 15 seconds or so. And almost everyone has voted. Thank you very much for that. Just going to give those last few people a chance to vote. and the results are a lot more decisive this time. I'm now going to close the poll and share the results. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, Damien, now we have a distinct leader with leadership performance and results. That's 65%. Increased engagement is at 25%. So those two alone count for 90%. And then reduced attrition, just 2%. And improved teamwork at 9%.
Great. Thank you, Ben. This is really interesting and makes completely sense to me because this is my personal experience over the years. I think most of the times the impact when I am hired is about leadership, performance, and results. And 25% for increased engagement. I think that these percentages make completely sense for everybody. And if we see some of the comments, and some of the people really think that a great portion of their success is around the work that they do with their coaches. So some of the quotes about increasing level of employee engagement, reduce attrition too. Here is only 2%. But we find out that the interviewees believe that coaching really helping their companies to accomplish this. And improved teamwork, 9% of the poll. Was also found that these were the 4 key areas where we find the greatest impacts of coaching organizations. So thank everybody for participating. The last part of the research is about return on investment, and a minority of organizations really have a formal process to measure the impact of coaching. I think that is going to change. I think eventually we're going to see more and more way that organizations want to see the return on investment. ICF came up with a book on return on investment. If anybody is interested, you can find information in our website. We believe that this is an important way to help organizations to assess how their investment is paid off. And we can see here in this study that people tended to use 360 feedback programs to start the process, and some organizations do the 360 1 year later and see if there is any progress as a way to measure success. And most organizations were collecting some feedback on the coaching engagement, but mainly they were informal. Mainly they were about personal experiences and results, but it was not received in a centrally way to be able to make some specific conclusions. So I think that I see our job also as coaches to be sure that we bring this to the awareness of organizations, just to invite them to consider how they want to measure the progress and success. That also gives us more credibility. There are many studies being done lately on return on investment. If you are interested, you can go to the International Coach Federation in our research portal. We have a few papers on return on investment. I think that any coach nowadays that is working in organizations needs to be familiar with ways to do studies and to understand and to measure success. Now, most organizations that do not have a formal process in place, and they find difficulty in measuring the impact of coaching. Sometimes they don't know how to do it. And almost all organizations study, they know coaching has been effective. So they know that coaching works, but the evidence is mainly anecdotal. Changes in behaviors definitely have been observed, but there was not a concrete qualitative way to measure these results. Sometimes people see for example, working for the United Nations, they in the Union Secretariat, they did the study. They did a return on investment study. And it was interesting because that was a result of me inviting them to participate in the Prisma Award program from the International Coach Federation, where organizations that use coaching are recognized over the world, and they're very successful, and they're able to measure return on investment. So I said, you need to measure the return on investment. I want you to participate in this study. But what they didn't know was that as a result of doing the study, they learned not only how effective coaching had been for them in the system and how the culture started to shift as a result of having most of the middle managers trained, and also executive and senior managers. But they found a lot of more information that they didn't have a clue, that they didn't know about how coaching and how people were able to use coaching to be more effective, not only at building their own performance and be more effective as leader, but also in terms of the cultural change, and how now coaching and developing people and learning in itself is a key component of the culture. So compared to other methods, when coaching is most effective, most organizations use other methods such as training, mentoring, and consulting. That was different in each organization. Some respondents mentioned that coaching was particularly effective due to the flexible nature of the coaching assignment, and see what were the specific needs. And so many times coaching is not the only way that people develop in organizations. So return on investment, there is another concept that is return on expectation. I don't know how many of you are familiar with return on expectation idea. And many of the participants have difficulties in defining them. So they were not even clear what they were, what they meant, or how they measured them. A few of the respondents mentioned that ROI, return on investment, would possibly help to gain senior level buy-in for implementing or expanding coaching. I completely agree with that. I think to the extent that organizations can have studies on return on investment, it's much easier to see the value, to see the results, and to sell it to other people in the organization. Return on expectation was more qualitative nature, but also is about adding value to the coaching. So let me share some conclusions, and then we are going to open for questions. The most important conclusions. Many organizations are utilizing coaching effectively, but to the extent to which the method is used is different in each organization. In general, there was not a specific event that initiated coaching. Coaching has evolved over time in the organizations. Most of the people who receive the coaching are senior level executives. Also, we found that some middle managers and some specific functions receive coaching, but mainly senior level executives in this case, in all of the 24 interviews, were the people who got the most coaching in their organizations. All organizations are using a mixture of internal and external coaches. There was a small number that used only external coaches. Confidentiality as a key issue, and very important to people, regardless of internal or external coaching being used. Reputation and recommendation are the most important differentiating criteria for choosing a coach. And by the way, if I am going a little bit fast, we can get this presentation for everybody, so you can get to look at the slides later. Organizational impact, such as improving leadership and employee engagement, have been recognized, but are not formally assessed. And in terms of internal coaches, there was a wide spectrum of training offer, ranging from a few days to full accredited training. The organization used a pool of coaches that they have developed over time. and they use tools such as 360 feedback and employee survey to assist in measuring the impact of some of the coaching done. So now we can leave it for open. We can open it for questions, Ben. So now is the time for people to ask any questions that they may have.
Thank you very much for that, Damien. Very, very insightful. Very much appreciate it. Now, we have a question that's come through that quite a few coaches have asked. And that is to expand further on return on expectation and how it should share that. Would you be able to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. Well, when there is not any way to measure return on investment, when organizations don't have in place a program to do that, return on expectations is the idea that when you start working with an organization, you clarify what are the expectations. You clarify what wants to be accomplished. For example, one possibility, one of the organizations that I work, their expectation is that people who go through coaching will have a development plan. And that development plan, that everything will be confidential, but that development plan will not. So the expectation when I am hired to work with this organization is that every executive or manager that I work with will have a coaching, a development plan that would be shared with human resources or with the boss. So the expectation is that people will have that plan and will implement that plan. Of course, the implementation is the most important part, but what they want to see is the plan with clear objectives and clear measurements of success for these specific behaviors, skills that they want to develop. So that would be an example. When you get in an engagement with an organization to clarify what are the expectations, and even though at the end of the day there is not a number or there is not a way to specifically measure that in terms of quantitative data, return on expectation is about qualitative data, and it's about, okay, the expectation, for example, would be that maybe 80% of all of the managers participating in the coaching program, where maybe there are 200 managers participating in the program, sometimes expecting that 100% will have a development plan, it may not be realistic, but that 80% of the managers participating in a program will have a plan and will implement part of it by a date that is established. So return on expectations is having a conversation and clarifying what is what the organization wants, and also is about being clear about what maybe cannot be measured with specific quantitative numbers, but still can be clear what is expected and making that happen. I don't know, we have Mark Ruth, our Director of Research from the International Coach Federation, and he may also add some comments to some of the questions. Mark, is anything that you would like to add here?
Yeah, hi Damien, and hello everyone. Thank you for having me on this call. A lot of the ways I've heard, Damien, people make the distinguish the difference between ROI and ROE is when the goal may be more monetary in nature. So if an organization has very clear goals and they emphasize some sort of financial business outcome, then it's a much easier pathway to measure ROI. Whereas if something's more qualitative, as you mentioned, say you're just trying to capture increased levels of workplace engagement or well-being in some way, decrease stress or goal attainment, then those organizations feel more comfortable indexing how things have changed post-coaching.
Thank you, Mark, for adding that.
Thank you very much. Okay, I've got another question.
What other question do we have, Ben?
Okay, coming up. What is, I mean, this goes to both of you, I guess, is what would be your recommendations for the best way to measure the ROI of coaching in organizations using both internal and external coaches?
Okay, Mark, that's a good question for you because you're an expert on that topic. So why don't you share a little bit more about that?
Well, I don't know if I'm an expert, Damien, but I do listen to what a lot of organizations tell us, and I can really tell you that it's difficult to come up with a standardized approach. One of the benefits, as we all know, of coaching is that it's so very adaptive, and that's why a lot of organizations tell us that they're choosing coaching compared to other modalities. So it's very difficult to come up with a single bullet theory that will work in any organization. What I have heard, and there's a lot of organizations out there that are really having great conversations about ROI, and you mentioned the book a moment ago, Damien. We actually didn't author the book, but we contributed to the book that was put out by the ASTD Press, well, maybe last year. But the ROI Institute and their methodology, some of you may be familiar, they have 5 levels of ROI. It's a very rigorous process, and I think a lot of organizations become, at times, intimidated by the work that's required to collect ROI data. It is a discipline, and many organizations feel like, you know, here we are just trying to sell the whole idea and notion of coaching to the organization and its employees. Selling them on having to collect data and report out on very specific metrics along the way is a whole nother conversation. So I don't think there's any magic way to do it with internal and external coaches. I think it's about narrowing down the number of things you want to measure. You know, what are your key indicators of success? I think if you have a really great conversation and the coaching initiative is tied to something that's very strategic for the organization, then you can always decide when you've measured enough things to where you can qualify the initiative as a success. But some of the, you mentioned the PRISM Award, Damien, some of the best examples we have of high achievement in organizational coaching don't always come with very hard financial ROI measurements. A lot of it is about demonstration of sustainability, having champions in place at the highest level of leadership within an organization. These are the things that we hear time and time again are what makes coaching work over time. So for those of you that, I'm not going to diminish the importance of ROI. There is just, it's a very customized approach that everyone should take. And if anyone has any questions about those resources I alluded to, you can feel free to send me an email and I will send those out, what we have available. My email address, Ben, I don't know if you want me to just give it out now or we can put it somewhere on the site.
My recommendation is that if you provide me with the resources, I'll give them out, because otherwise you'll be answering emails for the next 2 or 3 months. 2 or 3 months.
Fair enough. I'll do that after the call, Ben.
That would be super, Mark. Thank you. That's very kind of you to do that. Very, very kind indeed.
Yeah. Okay. And also related to the resources, there is one in particular that I think for the people who have a question or who are interested, we supported the development of this book that came up last year. It's called Measuring the Success of Coaching, and it's written by Lisa Ann Edwards. It's a step-by-step guide for measuring impact and calculating ROI. So I think that book is very easy to read and to understand, and can really help if somebody is really serious about doing it. That resource will be great. So when you get the bibliography, be sure that you pay attention to this book. It's called Measuring the Success of Coaching. It's a really great resource where I explain how to do it, and also you have case studies where you see how that has been done in these different places.
Thanks for that, Damien. Okay, so there's quite a lot of questions around this. Obviously, we have a very global audience joining us for WBEX, and the ICF too is global. And obviously, there's a lot of differences in culture, in the penetration of coaching, and in the acceptance levels. And there's quite a few questions around, are there any research, or is there any research at the moment that has gone into things like the penetration of coaching around the world, like how it's actually evolving within individual countries, and maybe some comparisons made? Is there anything there? I guess that would probably be to Mark or Damien.
When we have the global coaching study done last year, and in the global coaching study, you can see that there is some information about coaching in all of the different countries in the world. If we have a parameter that if we have more than 50 coaches participating by country, we have a specific data about that country. So if you go to our website and you look for the executive summary from the global coaching study, you will find the key results, and there is data about each country. Now, if you want to find a specific data about one of these countries that have more than 50 people, you can also access that information. I think there is a charge for that. But we have done that work last year, and there you will see the differences.
Just to clarify, Damien, so you're referring to the 2012 study that it's in addition to the executive summary, which is available for anyone to download, those data tables are as well. And it's actually for any nation that exceeded 100 completed surveys. You can gain a lot of insight about what coaching looks like in those areas. And the executive summary does begin to speak about the different emerging nations and regions that we observed during the study.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that. I mean, I'm fascinated by the cultural differences in development. So, you know, myself, I've lived in 5 continents. I've spent the last 6 years just traveling across the world, and although there's a lot of similarities, a lot of the approaches are very different. And obviously, our industry is growing so fast, and it's becoming less fragmented than it has been in the past. And some of this research is absolutely critical. So it's great to see that the ICF has taken a leadership point on this. So anyhow, next question. You mentioned about internal and external coach mixes. There's quite a few coaches have jumped in and asked, you know, are internal and external coaching used complementary? Can you give an example of how internal and external coach mix is managed or organized within organizations?
Mark, do you want to share some of the things that you heard about that in the study?
Again, it is very much how the organization considers their coaching life cycle. As I have observed in this study and through conversations with other organizations, there appears people who are getting into coaching for the first time, organizations who seem to be a little more receptive to internal coaching, and this comes off squarely as anecdotal evidence, but from the surveys, from the interviews that took place with these organizations, as it mentioned in the slides, very few were just using external coaches. I think the example was a very large company that had many regional offices around the world, and they had internal coaching used at one time, but they felt like it was difficult to deploy a consistent level of coaching across all of the regions, so they relied on a resource or network of external coaches in the different regions. And that was the only thing that really kept them from expanding their internal coach offerings. I don't really have an answer to how HR functions or learning and development professionals are finding that perfect balance. I think it is a lot around the people and a lot around the situations for which they brought coaching into the organizations to begin with. As long as cost is a consideration in the minds of some organizations, I think people are trying to be more resourceful and expand their capacity to get more people in their organization coached, and that is a reason why we hear a lot of internal coaching is growing around the world, because there's a perception that it can increase the capacity by spending less money.
Yeah. And what I want to add to what Mark is saying is that there is what I'm hearing more and more, and we had a conversation about that is not only about internal coaches and external coaches being used in organizations, but also developing leaders as coaches. So many companies, many organizations are very interested in getting their leaders to become in some way coaches and creating coaching cultures where learning and development is highly valued. So that's another trend that we are seeing. And I think that internal coaching organizations is recently, is kind of new. This is not these positions of internal coaches. Every day we see more and more. But in the past, like 15 years ago, 20 years ago, they didn't exist, right? Because the idea of coaching and the value of coaching came to develop over the last years or the last few years. So I can imagine that in the future, we're going to receive more and more internal coaching as an investment of the organization to have somebody working mainly, I would say, for mid-manager, because as we found that in the study, and based on my personal experience, organizations don't, higher level executives don't feel comfortable working with internal coaches because of politics, because of the confidentiality issues. So I feel that may be trends in the future. We may get to see more and more internal coaches. We get more and more coaching, training, leadership development around coaching and creating coaching cultures. So these are definitely the trends.
Okay,
I have time for one more question.
We've got two more questions. One's a quick answer, but one I want you to have a little think about. The second question is going to be for both of you, and that is, what surprised you most in the study results? So have a think about that. So what surprised you most about the study's results, or any of the studies? But the other question is, do you know how many organizations worldwide are using formal coaching programs? Has there been any research done into that?
I'll take a stab at that. Absolutely no idea. So we because of some of the confidentiality issues that Damien alluded to earlier, this is a very difficult subject to research, because some organizations and a lot of governmental organizations, while we hear coaching is growing in government organizations, some of them are very tight-lipped about how they spend their money and how much they disclose. And even the companies that we engaged in this study, they may have great stories to tell, and the ICF would love to be able to tell those stories on their behalf, but they really are very, very much concerned about perception of their organization, how forward-looking they are, the risks they're willing to take. And I think there's an education piece that we can help out with about why it's okay to tell these stories. But there is no registry that I'm aware of. There is no big list that says this many organizations are, and that evidence that we have is just anecdotal. And as far as surprises perhaps that emerged from this particular study, I really had higher expectations about how far coaching might have evolved in the organizational dialogue. Even though the companies that we spoke with were very large companies, some of them were Fortune 100 companies, I was a little bit taken aback at how they were kind of doing things on their own, making things up as they went along. And working for an organization like the ICF, I know of all the wonderful tools and education that we can offer organizations, and it was a bit frustrating to me that they would be coming up with messages around, like, if there only were a resource like XYZ, and here we offer that type of thing. So it's really a call to action for our organization to continue with our strategic alliance initiative and reaching out, because one of the goals this organization has is to make coaching the preferred resource for the business community. So I think if we were to repeat this study in a few years, my goal would be that a lot of people would, at the top of the mind, respond to things like, well, when I look for the most qualified coaches, I will go to a coach referral service where I know everyone is a credentialed coach, or something like that.
Yeah, when I got the results, Ben, I told Mark, I am not very surprised about the results, because I have been working in organization for so many years. I didn't find any of these results surprising to me. And I agree with what Mark just said. What I would like to see, and that is our challenge, and that is our learning for ICF, is that I would have liked to see that people say that they definitely look only for credential coaching when they're looking for coaches. As we can see today when we did the poll, only 18% of the participants believe that the credential is not important. And I wish and I hope, as a president of the ICF in the future, that we work in developing awareness in organizations, how important it is to hire people who are trained, who have the credentials. And yet it's important to use your recommendations, your people that you trust, your referrals, but also looking at the importance of hiring people who have been trained, who have the credentials, who follow the standards of ethics, code of ethics, So these are all things that we should pay attention to and we need to work on.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that session, Damien and Mark. The feedback already has been fantastic, but what I'd like to say to everyone is hold up, jump onto facebook.com/WBECS and post your feedback on there. We love to see it, and the presenters love to see that as well. I mean, it's a really insightful and valuable session covering some key areas that that's just interesting. You know, this is our industry. This is, you know, we're going to be in this industry for so long, and it's so important to see what's happening, not just in your own country, your own organization, but around the world, because those developments will filter through to where you are, even if you're in the farthest reaches of outer Mongolia, where coaching has already reached. So please keep on top of this, and thank you so much for your very insightful session, Damien and Mark. It was really, really valuable. I really appreciate that, and we will get those resources that Mark discussed. I'll liaise with Mark and make sure that we make those available to you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will be calling this session to an end and giving once again a big thank you to all of you for joining us, and a big thank you also to Damien and Mark for their awesome insights. So thank you very much, gentlemen, and
thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Ben, for
take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.